everybody. My name is Nardeen Kiswani, and I'm excited to begin this program with you all for Al-Quds Day, organized by Muslim Congress. Today is one of the last few days of Ramadan. And as we stand here protesting for Palestine, our Palestinian brothers and sisters back home are continuously denied the right to worship in their own home, denied the right to live freely. And this is why we must stand together as Muslims. It is our moral obligation and our duty to fight injustice wherever we see it. So we're going to teach you all a few chants to make sure that not only we hear our message, but that other people passing by in the crowd as they shop, as they ignore the suffering and the plight of the Palestinian people, they can hear about it and learn too. Free! Free Palestine!
Free Palestine!
Free, free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free.
Palestine will be free.
When people are colonized, resistance is justified.
Resistance is justified.
And we will free Palestine
Free Palestine.
within our lifetime. Long live Palestine!
Live Palestine.
Free, free Palestine!
Free Palestine.
Long live the Intifada! Intifada, Intifada! There is only one solution! Intifada revolution! Intifada, Intifada! Long live the Intifada! From New York to Gaza! Globalized by Intifada! Please give it up for our next speaker from the Notori Karda, Rabbi Deutsch.
Assalamu alaikum. We are gathered here today in New York City on this International Al-Quds Day. On this day, when thousands in many different cities around the globe are standing up in public for Al-Quds, standing up for Jerusalem, standing up for justice and for peace, standing up in support of the legitimate right of the Palestinian people, and protesting all Zionist atrocities. For the past 2 years, we have not held this annual event due to the COVID pandemic. But during these 2 years, the Zionists have not been resting. On the contrary, their occupation is continuing. They have kept up their aggression in full swing, including killing of men, women and children, targeting journalists, settlements expansion, provocations in Sheikh Jarrah, and ongoing home demolitions, and especially the latest aggression on Al-Aqsa. We cannot be silent and will not be silent. This is not just about Al-Quds, Jerusalem. This is about the whole occupation which we condemn here today. This occupation is the cause of all the ongoing trouble almost the last 75 years there. It is just as our greatest rabbis said long ago when they warned about Zionism, that will only lead to misfortune and constant wars. Yes, we know that the Zionists are unable to face the world's outrage over constant reports of their crimes that reach the public. Therefore, they try to accuse righteous activists who stand up in public as being anti-Semitic. They take quotes out of context to make them sound anti-Semitic. They refuse to listen to what people are really saying. Their goal is to silence their critics and allow the blatant crimes of their movement to continue. They take the same approach of misquotation to our religion too. They always take out quotes from the Torah, but out of context, to make it look as if the Torah supports their occupation and existence and justify their crimes. But the truth is that according to the Torah, the entire state of Israel is forbidden. Our greatest rabbis and their followers were opposed to it from day one and remain opposed to this day. Pro-Palestine activism has nothing to do with anti-Semitism. For centuries, Jews lived in peace and harmony with their Arab neighbors. Jewish people lived in peace with their Arab neighbors before the invention of Zionism. This was the case in Palestine as in other Muslim countries. We don't see the Arab as our enemies, but we do see the Zionist movement as the enemy of our people, our religion, and Almighty God. The state of Israel is not a Jewish state, it is a Zionist state. Judaism and Zionism are diametric opposites. Judaism is our religion, Zionism is a nationalistic movement. The Almighty is compassionate and merciful, so we are commanded to behave. But Zionism promotes cruelty and theft, all which is forbidden according to Jewish law. Fighting against occupation, against crimes of international law, is in no way anti-Semitic. In fact, Jewish people and the Jewish religion itself are against all of this. It should be admired when courageous activists stand up for justice and condemn Israeli atrocities. And it is even more worthy when at the same time they make a clear distinction between Judaism and Zionism. Since the very beginning of the Zionist movement to the present day, authentic Jews, rabbis, and laymen alike have opposed the Zionist crimes against the Palestinian people and even the mere existence of the State of Israel, which violates the basic Jewish belief in a divinely decreed exile. Jews are forbidden by our Holy Torah to take any steps to end by physical means the exile. It is the Zionist movement which does so as it attempts to uproot religion from the masses of Jewish people. We pray for the speedily and peaceful dismantlement of the State of Israel, for respect and dignity to be returned to the Palestinian people, and that all refugees should be allowed to return to their homes, and that all homes be returned to their rightful owners. Ultimately, we pray the glory of the Almighty be revealed throughout the universe, His kingdom be accepted by all. As we say in our prayers, we all gather together in unity to do your will, in peace and harmony. Amen. Thank you.
I'm gonna do a chant that I learned from you all actually. Judaism, yes. Zionism, no. The state of Israel must go.
Yes. Zionism, no. The state of Israel must go.
Not another nickel, not another dime, no more money for Israel's crimes.
Not another dime, no more money for Israel's crimes.
Please give it up for our next speaker, Ali Javad. He is an activist from right here in New York City.
Takbir! 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 أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وعلى الطيبين الطاهرين أما بعد قال أمير المؤمنين علي بن أبي طالب عليه الصلاة والسلام وكون للظالمين خصما وللمظلوم عونا. Imam Ali alayhi salam, when he was martyred on the 21st of Ramadan, in his will he states, be an enemy to the oppressor and a supporter of the oppressed. Today, on the last Friday of the holy month of Ramadan, Yawm Al-Quds, we are here to commemorate and support and show solidarity to the people of Palestine. And in general, we think of this as a day to support Palestine, and truly it is. But overall, our purpose to be here is to support the oppressed people throughout the world, especially in Palestine. We see there is injustice taking place in Yemen, in Afghanistan, in Iraq, and as I mentioned, in Palestine, which we are here for today. And we are here to show our support in large numbers for them. And we are here to condemn the Zionist entity for committing aggression against the innocent people of Palestine. For the past 70 years, more than 70 years, we see that the Palestinians have been tortured, suffering, and it's an everyday life that they go through is unimaginable. Imagine going to airport security every single day just to go in from one neighborhood to the other neighborhood. That's what Palestinians are living through on an everyday basis. And today, I just want to mention that Palestine, Yemen, or any of these countries is not a religious issue. It's not an issue for Islam. It's not an issue of Christianity. It's not an issue of Judaism. But it's a humanitarian crisis. And it is our responsibilities as human beings on the basis of humanity that we condemn the Zionist entity. We condemn the Saudi regime for doing injustice towards the Yemens, to doing injustice towards the Palestinians. And one message that I want to leave you with is that on every day that we live, be it our schools, our jobs, our workplaces, it is a moral obligation upon us that we raise awareness for injustice taking across the globe, be it in Palestine, be it in Yemen. And I want you to make sure that every person that you work with, every classmate that you have, should be aware of the injustice taking place. Thank you. Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
From the river to the sea,
From the river to the sea,
Palestine will be free.
Palestine will be free.
From the river to the sea,
From the river to the sea,
Palestine will be free.
Palestine will be free.
Please give it up for our next speaker and comrade, Joe Catron from the Samadoun Palestine Prisoner Solidarity Network.
Oh, thank you. It is right to rebel. Israel, go to hell. Thank you. In a statement for Palestinian Prisoners Day on April 17th, George Abdallah, a Lebanese resistance leader imprisoned by France since 1984, said, "The Palestinian people affirm by the blood of their martyrs in Jenin, Qadira, Yabub, and Bethlehem that Palestine, its land and people, is more united than ever. They pulverize with the blood of their martyrs not only the deal of the century, but also, and above all else, the Oslo agreements, and signify to the entire Arab bourgeoisie their refusal and condemnation of all steps aimed at the normalization of relations between the Arab countries and the Zionist entity. They thus affirm the unshakable will of the Palestinian popular masses to send to the dustbin of history the normalization between the Zionist entity and all these lackeys, emirs, and kinglets." As we commemorate Al-Quds Day, we celebrate Palestinian resistance. which has defined the Palestinian cause and kept it alive against unbelievable odds for over a century. In less than an hour by Palestine time, Khalil Awauda, an administrative detainee held without charge or trial, will begin his 59th day of an open hunger strike against his military internment. He is one of 530 administrative detainees starting their 119th day of an ongoing boycott of the Zionist military court system launched on January 1st of this year. Along with other Palestinian political prisoners, from national leaders like Ahmed Sadat, General Secretary of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, to those such as Ahmed Manasra, imprisoned as children. These fighters of the Palestinian prisoners movement are part of the Palestinian resistance forces lighting the path for millions around the world today. They are the leaders of our struggle for the liberation of Palestine from the river to the sea. And like the Palestinian worshippers fighting back against Zionist invasions of Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, as well as the brigades from Gaza to Jenin, ready to strike in defense of Al-Quds, their example of resistance should compel all of us to escalate our efforts in solidarity with the Palestinian national movement. 1, 2, 3, 4, open up the prison door.
1, 2, 3, 4, open up the prison door.
5, 6, 7, 8, smash the settler Zionist state.
5, 6, 7, 8, smash the settler Zionist state.
Thank you.
When Palestine is under attack, what do we do? What do we do? When Palestine is under attack, what do we do? What do we do? I can't hear you guys. I can't hear you. I have to hear you so that everybody else can hear you too. When Palestine is under attack, what do we do? What do we do? When Palestine is under attack, what do we do? What do we do? Please give it up for our next speaker, Sarah Flounders.
Greetings today on Al-Quds Day. Every year, such an important day to mark, to remember. Greetings from Workers' World Party in continuing solidarity with the people of Palestine. And every year comes a new outrage. This year, once again, the brutal attack on Al-Aqsa Mosque and the relentless, unending attacks in Gaza. This is a struggle that has gone on from generation to generation. And that's why not only are we here today, but across the world, people mark Al-Quds Day. Because the Palestinian people themselves have been unrelenting in their struggle, have been continuing in their determination that from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Palestine will be free of the brutal, racist, apartheid Israeli state that from its very founding has been a racist regime, kept alive by endless infusions from the Pentagon. U.S. imperialism needs that racist apartheid state and needs that repression and the endless wars that come with it. But across the world, everywhere that people resist, they look to Palestine for inspiration. They look to Palestine for an example of continuing struggle. So today and every day, we say, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free.
is justified when people are colonized. Resistance is justified when people are colonized. Resistance is justified when people are colonized. Please give it up to our next speaker, Suha Sayed. Should I go like that? Assalamu alaikum, New York, make some noise! Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine! All right, assalamu alaikum. I hope you guys are doing well. Make some noise! Looks good, looks good. So my name is Suha Sayed. I'm a writer, poet, student, and activist based in the New York City and Long Island area. And today I'm going to be sharing with you guys a poem I wrote in 2021 when a lot of news was surrounding Palestine and it was making national headlines. So I wrote my emotions down and expressed them in the best way I know, which is through poetry. This is Scarlet Rain. I'd walk through glass and stone and sand for the people of Palestine to return to their land. Earth that was once lush and teeming with life is now left alone as a wasteland of disaster, hurt, and strife. Children cry until their pleas go hoarse as missiles litter the sky with no ounce of remorse. Bodies lay amongst an ocean of homes that used to be a safe land for the tired, the kindest of sanctuaries. Yet the weeps of civilians fall on deaf ears as the children of Gaza weep with no soul to catch their tears. Imagine the home that you've loved since your days as a child crumble to dust within seconds, your past heaped within piles of rubble and dust, ashes and debris, broken bricks on shattered glass as the wounds of children bleed. Palestinians, please hear our call. Here's to no more territories, blockades, or walls. Smiles will return to the faces of your youth, for the fights that matter most are the fights for the truth. City streets are painted with the darkest of crimson as visions of a nightmare become the reality so many live in. The reality in which a mother is ripped away from her daughter and amidst the scarlet rain of senseless grief and slaughter. Mama are the words she will no longer get to hear, as the eyes that once flood rain cannot form any more tears. A lifetime of memories will never see the light, as 9 months inside a womb just to go inside a tomb. Milestones will never have the blessing of being met, as heaps of discarded dreams are discarded over hospital beds. Little bodies of the innocent wrapped in white scatter the room as they dot graves like petals which never got the chance to bloom. The world idly watches the suffering of our own flesh and vein drowning to death before our eyes from an everlasting rain. Rain that takes away the light and promises no tomorrows, washing every glimmer of hope to replace it with a brand new shade of sorrow. World leaders sit upon thrones of money and of greed, bathing in the drops of blood every single martyr bleeds. Allah, I ask you from the depths of my soul to ease the suffering of those who simply cannot bear the toll of their loved ones being ripped from limb to aching limb, because the suffering of Palestine should break us all up from within. The people of Gaza, I break down at your plight, and for you to see the light again, I trade all my days for nights. I reach my hands up to the heavens, imploring for the time when children just existing should not be considered a crime. Our hurt is collected and this pain unified, as I know flowers will bloom over the same ground where tears have fully dried. So please take a moment right now to remember those who have perished. Let their lives serve as memories for every living soul to cherish. But perhaps hope lies within the windows of this sorrow as rain clouds leave the skies in time for a new tomorrow, a tomorrow in which we all have a hand in forming as the blackest nights make way for the glorious of all mornings.
So no matter your color, your faith, or creed, red is the shade that we all bleed. My responsibility lies within the power of my words, so I'll repeat every rhyme until every line is heard. So I hope within our lifetime that every inch from land to sea will make way for a Palestine that is by all means free. Thank you. Thank you guys so much. I apologize for the little hiccups there, but free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine! Thank you so much. Free, free Palestine! Free, free, free Palestine! From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, and we will free Palestine within our lifetime. Resistance is justified when people are colonized. Please give it up for our next speaker, Esteban Nakfi.
Liberté pour la Palestine and French people. Liberté pour la Palestine. I am French. Liberté pour la Palestine. Free Palestine. Algerian people. I like New York. I love Muslim of people. I like New York. I like Palestine. Free Palestine. Liberté pour la Palestine. Thank you.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I just ran because I was late to come here. Excuse me if I've been, We are here in solidarity to our brothers and sisters in Palestine. Though we are thousands of miles away, but our heart beat with the heart of our Palestine brothers and sisters. Your sorrow is our sorrow. We love the way you're fighting the most terrorist regime in the world. We know in 70 years they have reduced Palestine to only 15%. They took 85% of Palestine by might and by force. And we are also mad on the corrupt media of the Western nations, which never show the true picture of the most oppressive nation in the world. What we saw in Ramadan, in the mosque of Aqsa, they were praying. They were not demonstrating. They're praying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the holy days of Ramadan. And what we did, we saw some rogue cops coming and shooting, tear gassing, and the way they throw the bodies in a way that just like a sack of a meat. How can we forget the old lady which was hurt in a way that she broke her arm? Only I have to say one thing to that lady. Wish you would be Ukrainian. If you would be from Ukraine, maybe media would cover you. But you are from Palestine. They do not want to show the pictures, which is shown by the public, will be outraged about the action of the army of the most oppressive nation of the world. We also condemn the Muslim leaders, those who are quiet, those who are looking and watching the scenes and not saying a word in the favor of Palestine. The struggle they have done for 70 years, a nation which have no army to defend, they have no arms to defend themselves, they have blockade, they cannot go through the water, they cannot come to the air, and they cannot come to the land. What kind? They are living in a jail, in open jail, without any covering for them. They cannot travel in their own land without asking for permits from these corrupt and torturous nation of the world. But everyone is quiet and keep quiet and not even saying a word against this aggression which has been taken over 70 years. One day, we hope, inshallah, the day is not too far when the Palestinians will be freed and there will be a nation like any other nation in the whole world. And also, we cannot ignore the flight of Yemeni people who have been bombed day and night without any resistance. What did they do? Okay, Palestinians did something wrong according to them, but what about them? They did nothing wrong. They came to their house and they bombed them all overnight. This is the way the world is. But the Muslim world, and especially the Muslim leaders, I'm not talking about the public, I'm not talking about the masses, but talking about the rulers, those who are keeping their eyes closed, and they're all afraid that if they do not support the Western, they will lose their seats, and shame for them. And also in the media too. On media, you have a right to cover everything the way it has been happening. Do not sugarcoat, and there is a clash. If one single baby or a young child take a stone from the ground and defend himself, it becomes a clash. It becomes a very, very bad thing. Oh, they resistant. They throw the stone on us because you are bombing them, you are killing them, you bullet them. And also, we cannot forget the support, and supports them all the time. The courage of the lady called Rachel, which gave her life defending the land of Palestine, defending the home of the Palestinian people. And in the end, I will just want to say, today, tomorrow, we have a right we have to come here to raise our voice. Maybe it is not enough, but we have to do it our part. And inshallah, Allah will give us success in one day. Inshallah, we'll see Palestine as a free land.
Palestine will be free by any means necessary. Palestine will be free by any means necessary. Palestine will be free by any means necessary. Please give it up for our next speaker, Pippa Bartolotti.
Thank you everybody. Thank you for having me. I'm from Britain, as you can probably tell. And I have perhaps a slightly different perspective on the matter, because it was Britain who had the mandate for Palestine, who capitulated under the Zionist gangs and gave Palestine away. It is a blot on the stain of the nation that I was born into. We have a huge responsibility for the agony of Palestinians, not here, but around the world. It is not just an honor, not just a pleasure, but it is a privilege to speak up for the oppressed wherever we see it. It is not just an honor, it is not just a pleasure, it is a privilege to wear a keffiyeh. And we should be proud that we are together today with one voice, because what is happening in Palestine is unconscionable. I've been to Gaza. I've seen what it's like. I've seen the air. I've seen the drones. I've seen the warships patrolling the shore and shooting at the little fishing boats, trying to get just something for the family to eat. I've seen the borders, where even they will shoot at the donkeys from across that fence. I've seen the young men wounded, the young men with shrapnel in their heads. I've written about these things in some of my books. So let us take this privilege we have and use it, not just here today, but every day. Let us not shirk from this label we will be given of being anti-Semitic when we are not. We are humanity together. It is not anti-Semitic to criticize the strategy of the Israeli regime. It is not anti-Semitic to stand up for Palestinians in their collective punishment, their illegal collective punishment, their illegal apartheid. Israel has become a racist state. It was always the plan. And a racist state will always be a problem to its neighbors and shall have no friends. I would submit that although Britain carries a large responsibility for giving Palestine away to the Zionists, the USA carries the modern responsibility of keeping it supplied with arms and with money. The regime is propped up with the taxes of good people in this city and around this country. We must stop arming Israel. We must stop paying lip service to politicians who only want to take money from Zionist funders. We all together must take a stand, not just today, but every day. Because while the world is looking at Ukraine and the terrible things that are happening there and the lies we are told about Ukraine, the eye is off Palestine, and yet Gaza is being bombed almost every day. So take it as a privilege to stand up for the oppressed everywhere. Take it as your individual privilege to do what you're doing today and do it every day. And let's all together take a stand and stop arming Israel. Thank you.
Free Palestine! Free Palestine! From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. And we will free Palestine within our lifetime. Resistance is justified when people are colonized. Once again, my name is Nadine Kiswani, and I'm speaking on behalf of Within Our Lifetime, United for Palestine. We are a revolutionary Palestinian community organization revitalizing the spirit of revolution of Palestinians in exile. And we stand here with you today on the last Friday of Ramadan, the day that we always commemorate Al-Quds Day. On the day that we always commemorate Al-Quds Day. Today at dawn, the last Friday of Ramadan in Palestine, the occupation forces stormed the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound, something that they were doing every single Friday, almost every day, something that Palestinians are used to year after year as we try to partake in our religious and our cultural practices. Whether it's fasting, whether it's praying at Al-Aqsa Mosque, or whether Palestinian Christians who are trying to attend the Sepulchre Church for Easter, we are routinely denied access to our religious sites because it is being controlled by an occupying force that does not have the right to be there to begin with. They stormed the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound, occupied the rooftops of several buildings, and fired rubber-coated steel bullets, stun grenades, and tear gas canisters, injuring 42 Palestinians, over 20 of whom were hospitalized. In the week between April 15 and April 22nd, Israeli occupation forces raided Al-Aqsa 7 times, resulting in over 170 Palestinians wounded and 450 arrested, with these numbers rising day by day. The mass arrest campaign of Palestinians in Al-Aqsa has also targeted Palestinian children. who was kidnapped, jailed, and tortured for 12 days after Israeli occupation forces accused him of throwing stones. Resistance is justified when people are colonized. We need to draw it out. These Zionists do not deserve a single space, a single iota of our attention as they kill our people. The least they can do is shut up. So we're going to drown them out. Resistance is justified when people are colonized. Resistance is justified when people are colonized. Resistance is justified when people are colonized. Do not let the Zionists take away attention from this rally, from the information that we are sharing. That is precisely what they wish to do. They wish to distract everybody from hearing the truth about Palestine by spreading their hate and lies. Do not allow one fascist, Zionist, genocide supporter to take away our energy from the solidarity that we are giving to the Palestinian people right now. Do not give these Zionists any more attention. The rally is here. The message of solidarity that we are sending is here. And we have to keep on going. We have a whole day planned for Palestine. Another protest is being planned. Another protest is happening in just a few minutes. And I want to share all of that with you. But we all need to be here. Do not give the Zionists any more attention. Speaking of Palestinian children, we cannot talk about the abduction of Palestinian children without mentioning Ahmed Manasra, who has been imprisoned in Israeli jail cells for over 7 years after he was kidnapped by the Zionists, after witnessing his family member getting shot in the head. Keep these names in your mind. Continue to fight for them every day. Since March 22nd, 29 Palestinians have been murdered by occupation forces. Most recently, 18-year-old Ahmed Masad from the village of Burqin and 20-year-old Ahmed Awadad from Aqab al-Jabal camp outside of Ariha in the West Bank. The majority of martyrs from March have been from Jenin. And on Thursday, the Zionist entity's high court gave the green light for the construction of a 6-story apartment complex for settlers in the heart of Al-Khalil. Like the speaker before me said, none of this would be possible without US imperialism and British imperialism, European imperialism and colonialism that has divided and devoured the world, that has divided the Middle East, and that has killed our people. This is why we must stand against US imperialism and all its supporters, including Saudi Arabia. I leave you today with the message that the solidarity for Palestinian people does not just begin or end on Al-Quds Day. It does not just begin or end on any of the rallies that we attend. It is a fight that we take on every single day, from everywhere we are, with whatever resources we have. Just a few days ago, 10 presidents and deans from the City University of New York, including the Chancellor, announced that they were going on a normalizing trip to the Zionist entity, or so-called Israel. They are going to whitewash the crimes of the Zionist state. During Ramadan, while we are being killed, these are what the presidents and deans of schools of New York City are doing. This is a smack in the face of every Palestinian and every single person fighting for justice. This is why at 5:30 we are meeting up in front of the CUNY Graduate Center to protest this. After this rally, we will march over together and meet up with another contingent at the CUNY Graduate Center at 5:30 for a protest organized by Within Our Lifetime, CUNY Law SJP, and many other SJP chapters, as well as CUNY for Palestine, to let them know that we stand against anybody going to the Zionist entity, normalizing the Zionist entity, visiting the Zionist entity, and not standing unequivocally with the Palestinian people as they should be. So join us at 5:30 at the CUNY Graduate Center. It's just 5 minutes away. We will march there together and we will make a stand and let them know that no Zionists are welcome in our city. And any person who wants to declare themselves a Zionist, whether they work at CUNY, whether they are a public official, we will demand their immediate resignation. Free! Free Palestine!
Free Palestine!
Free, free, free Palestine!
Free, free, free Palestine!
And we will free Palestine!
Free Palestine!
Within our lifetime!
In our lifetime!
Thank you.
Free, free Palestine!
Free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Free Palestine!
Our next speaker is someone I know really, really well, and he wears many different hats, but today he's here as an activist and a community organizer. His name is Dr. Raza Mousavi, and the title of his speech is anti-Zionism the same as anti-Semitism? Because that is something that we are all accused of, and it takes education, and it takes learning about the difference between the two terms. And if there was no difference, we wouldn't have rabbis here supporting this cause. So please welcome Dr. Raza Mousavi.
Assalamu alaikum. Good evening. Is anti-Semitism the same as anti-Zionism? This is something which the Zionists would like you to believe that it's the same, but is it? That's the subject that we're going to explore today. Judaism is a 4,000-year-old respectable religion. Zionism is a politically motivated, white nationalist, settler, colonial movement which is just a few hundred years old. It was created in Europe to allow a group of troubled people to go and settle in a distant land. Today, I'm here to clear some of those myths, but for that I need some of your help. Because every time I point the mic at you, I want you to say one word, all loud and proud together, Zionism, okay? Let's try this out. 3, 2, 1.
Zionism!
3, 2, 1.
Zionism!
Zionists claim that they have a biblical right to the land of Palestine. Orthodox Jews like the Neturei Karta oppose Zionism because they feel that the Jews must not have a land of their own till the Messiah arrives, especially not through oppression and suppression of the people over there. Aren't they interpreting the same Torah and the Bible? Is that anti-Semitism or is that anti-Zionism? 1903, the founder of Zionism, Theodor Herzl, wanted the land of Palestine but was ready to settle for a land in Kenya instead. If the land promised by God to you was so sacred, why were you willing to settle for another one? Is that reminder on history anti-Semitism or anti-Zionism? Genetic studies were performed to prove that the European Jews that migrated to Israel were from that local area of Middle East. Dr. Oppenheim of Hebrew University and later Dr. Elhack of Johns Hopkins in independent studies virtually found that all the Jewish immigrants had Khazar blood. Not Jewish and Middle Eastern blood, but Khazar blood. And worse, they found that some of the local Palestinians, in fact, had Jewish blood. And how could that be? That's because theirs were the initial Jews who never migrated, stayed back, converted to Islam. And is that discussion anti-Semitism or anti-Zionism? Many anti-Semites support Zionism because they wanted to remove Jews from Europe. Theodor Herzl, their forefather, wrote, quote, "The anti-Semites will become our most loyal friends." He was right for sure. The famous Arthur Balfour, you know, the guy who gave them the land, the Balfour Declaration, had said that he called the European Jews a misery for the West as they were alien and hostile. He also said men are not born equal. White and black races are born with different capacities. Is this discussion about anti-Semitism or anti-Zionism? They call anybody who opposes Israel an anti-Semite. But there's one problem. There's a growing number of Jews who oppose Israel and its racist policies. What about a Noam Chomsky, an Ilan Pape, a Miko Peled, a Medea Benjamin, to name a few? In 2018, 35 Israeli laureates and prize winners had gotten together an open letter in which they wrote, "Many victims of the Holocaust opposed Zionism, while many anti-Semites supported Zionism. It's nonsensical to identify anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism." Is that anti-Semitism or anti-Zionism? If you want to learn about the first terrorists of the Middle East, just Google Israeli militia and terrorism. Just do that, okay? And you can even narrow the search down to Israeli newspapers like the Haaretz. You will find names like Irgun and Haganah pop up. You will learn how they were responsible for the Deir Yassin massacre, the King David Hotel bombing, the Semiramis Hotel bombing, and the cold-blooded murder of a Swedish diplomat and negotiator, Folk Bernadotte. Does that sound like anti-Semitism or anti-Zionism? 1948, the Nakba. 800,000 Palestinians were either killed or displaced. 531 of the 1,000 villages were destroyed. It was an ethnic cleansing and exposure of the Palestinians just because there'll be a Jewish majority. 5.6 million Palestinians are still registered by UNRWA as refugees, and they're not allowed back home. If the entire premise of Israel is that they want to return back to their homeland, to return back to the home, and the homeland from 2,000 years ago, then why aren't you allowing these Palestinians when you kicked them out in 1948? Is that hypocrisy? Is that anti-Semitism or anti-Zionism? Say I'm a Native American, okay? You live in Bronx, I come and knock on your door and say in the middle of the night that you have to get out of there. Why? Because somewhere in this area my forefathers lived. And that's a house that your great-great-great-grandfather built, and you have been living there for generations. And you say, what can you prove? How do you prove that? You say that the proof is my interpretation of my religious book. But if you don't listen, the NYPD will come and throw you out of here, demolish the house, and by the way, you have to pay for the demolition. Is that ridiculous but real example anti-Semitism or anti-Zionism? Israel is the only democracy, like that poster says, in the Middle East. We hear that all the time. Let's examine that a little bit. Israel's first Prime Minister Ben Gurion said, if we want Hebrew redemption, we must have 100% Hebrew settlement, Hebrew farm, Hebrew port. He called the Jewish immigrant in North Africa a savage. He called the Jewish laborers should earn higher salary as they were more intelligent than the Arabs. Does that sound like the founder of a democracy? And is that anti-Semitism or anti-Zionism? Let us examine some of the laws of this great democracy. The 1950s law of return. Say you're born in New York, but you have never set foot in Israel, but you want to go and settle there. You can. Not only you can do that, but you'll get a free ticket. Once you land there, the 1952 citizenship law will give you that citizenship. You can pass it on to your spouse. And if you are a non-Jewish person over there, forget about it. Is that anti-Semitism or anti-Zionism? The 1950s absentees property law doesn't allow you to own property if you have left the place for 8 years. But if you are Jewish, surprise, surprise, this does not apply. Israel took away hundreds and thousands of acres of land because those Palestinians were absent. They were absent because you threw them out and you're not letting them back in. ethnic engineering to ensure Israeli dominance. They build around Palestinian communities, choking off all chances of expansion. 21% of the Israeli citizens are Arabs, but you know how much land they own? 3%. Is this discussion anti-Semitism or anti? 2018 nation-state law is the best one of them all. Democracy by left foot. It says that Israel is a state of the Jewish people and the right of self-determination is unique to the Jewish people. It promotes illegal settlements. As Netanyahu himself said, Israel isn't a state of all its citizens, but a nation state of the Jewish people and only them. To say it's not a democracy is not anti-Semitism, it is. Amnesty International in its 2015 report documented unlawful killings of 15,000 Palestinians, including 2,000 children. Hear that, Ukrainian humanitarians? Israeli human rights organization B'Tselem described the methods to torture. Human Rights Watch in its 2021 report, A Threshold Cross, made detailed documentation of how Israel met the definition of an apartheid nation. After all this proof we discovered, even that Zionists cannot call Israel a democracy, and that is really Is there any anti-Semitism around in this world? You bet. It's been there for decades. Like myself, I'm sure all of you who are gathered here find anti-Semitism reprehensible, vile, and condemn the destruction of synagogues and other religious places. The propaganda is that the anti-Zionists like ourselves or movements like the BDS are responsible for it. However, most of these attacks are by the white nationalists. Their leader, Richard Spencer, himself called himself a white Zionist who saw Israel as a role model for the white homeland that he wants to create in the United States. Remember Charlottesville? Jews will not replace us. And is Israel's favorite president saying very fine people on both sides? That is anti-Semitism, and discussing that is They say Jews should have a nation. There are many ethnic groups who don't have a state, like the Uyghurs, the Rohingyas, the Kurds, the Druze, Kashmiris, Tamils, Scots. Forget all that. How about the Native Americans right here? That isn't anti-Semitism, that is anti. What are some arguments against Palestine? They say there isn't a letter P in Arabic, so there couldn't be a Palestine. True, Arabs can't even say the letter P properly. They say Coke and Pepsi, for God's sake. Habibi, Arabs didn't call it Palestine, they call it Palestine. However, a friendly reminder to my Jewish friends, there's no J in Hebrew. Is this cheesy, unacademic discussion anti-Semitism or is it anti? In conclusion, what is the solution? Another peace accord like Oslo, which is Israel will keep breaking again and again with its continued expansion and settlements. Avi Shlaim, a renowned historian and Oxford professor, talked about these peace accords between the two. It's like negotiating over the pizza when one party keeps on eating that pizza. Two-state solution has been dead for a while. This conflict has stumped all the famous negotiators, including the most famous one of them all, who read 25 books on this topic, Jared Kushner. Imagine that. There is only one solution, and that is one state with equal rights for all. We won't accept Palestinian nor Jewish children being killed. We want peace, we want justice, we want freedom. However, we will not be scared by making our movement as anti-Semitism. You hope we will quietly disappear into the night. We'll be right here until that oppressed nation is free. Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Thank you so much, Dr. Musfi. Our next speaker is Kauthar Abdullah. Kauthar, are you here? She is a volunteer for the Yemeni Alliance Committee of New York. She's actually a Yemeni American herself. We are so happy to have her here.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. So the Yemeni Alliance Committee stand in solidarity with and for love for the Palestinian people. For over 70 years, Palestinians have been facing settler colonialism, ethnic cleansing, occupation, invasion, murder of civilians, destructions of homes and hospitals, along with the suffocating humanitarian economic control by Israel, backed by the US, UK, and other Western powers. The same forces that support the Saudi UAE-led aggression on Yemen, that has destabilized the country and eroded our food supplies and created the worst humanitarian crisis of the century. Since the conflict in Ukraine began about 2 months ago, we've seen how the media romanticized Ukrainian resistance and in the same breath demonize Palestinian, Yemeni, and other resistance movements throughout the world. If we can learn anything from the Palestinian struggle, it is their relentless resistance to injustice, occupation, ethnic cleansing, military invasions, and Western hegemony. The Yemeni people have always loved and supported the Palestinian movement, but felt it personally when they had to defend themselves against military attack, regional aggression, Western intervention, and violation of their country's sovereignty. There are so many similarities between the Palestinian struggle and the military aggression inside of Yemen. When it comes to the Palestinian and Yemeni cause, you tend to hear that it's Palestinians and Yemenis, respectively, are killing each other, or that it's complicated. But what's complicated about the fourth largest military in the world stealing the homes of Palestinians, terrorizing civilians, taking over their land and their places of worship during the holiest month of the year? Or they frame what's happening in Palestine as clashes or evictions. It removes the oppressor, the source of the devastation, to whitewash and downplay the gruesome acts of the settler colonial Israeli state. Similarly, in Yemen, when reporting a massacre by the Saudi UAE-led coalition, the headline often reads, 50 people died, or Yemen is starving, instead of saying the Saudi UAE-led coalition bombed a supermarket killing 50 people, or Yemen is being starved by the Saudi UAE-imposed blockade. Again, it removes the oppressor from the picture. They use passive language. This is very intentional. It is to continue oppressing the victims, which in this case Yemenis and Palestinians, and strip us of any claims to international justice. Because we all know language matters. We've seen how language and the framing of the conflict in Ukraine led to international support and economic, social, and political boycotts. They've made heroes out of the Ukrainian people resisting Russian intervention, and terrorists of Palestinians who defend themselves and their land from occupation, invasion, and ethnic cleansing for more than 70 years. The conflict in Ukraine has exposed the hypocritical double standards of the West. For decades, they've tried to manipulate us with the words to believe that the villagers with stones are a threat to one of the most militarized occupations in the world, backed with billions of dollars in military arms from the US. That sounds familiar? That's because the US also supports the Saudi UAE-led coalition. The United States has made billions of dollars in arms sales to the Saudi UAE-led coalition since it began its military assault on Yemen in 2015. Occupation, settler colonialism, military aggression, destruction of homes, schools, hospitals, and misery of innocent people is a well-fueled machine that generates lots of money. And people's lives, specifically Black, brown, and Arab and indigenous people of the world, have a low currency, unfortunately. And in the decade following September 11, military spending increased 50%. In comparison, on every other non-military programs, things like education, healthcare, public transit, and science grew by only 13.5% over the same period. In 2018 alone, U.S. defense spending was $732 billion. That's more than 10 countries combined. This is annually 16% of the federal budget that we taxpayers pay for. And the biggest beneficiaries by country miles were Lockheed Martin, that made $36.2 billion. Boeing, $24.3 billion. Raytheon, $12.8 billion. General Dynamics, that made $12.7 billion. These are bomb makers that land on Palestinian and Yemeni homes. They also provide equipment to Israel to maintain the occupation and terrorization of Palestinians. Whether it's the private prison industry here in the US or occupation or military expansion in the East, systems of oppression are ruled by the same people. But we have us, we have each other, we are more than them, and together we can dismantle these systems that oppress black and brown people in the US, in Palestine, in Kashmir, Afghanistan, Somalia, Yemen, the Philippines, Venezuela, and everywhere else that there is oppression. I will leave you with the last comments. May Allah punish the oppressors, whoever they are, and help the oppressed wherever they are. Imam Ali alayhi salam once said, the day that justice is brought to the oppressor is much more severe than the day oppression is done unto the oppressed. Assalamu alaikum and free Palestine.
Thank you so much, Kausar. Our next speaker is a young poet and activist, and her name is Sayyida.
Assalamu alaikum. So inshallah, I'll be reading an English poem. Palestine. Like the olive tree that thrives, little water its land provides, yet odds it defies. For after hundreds of years, it still survives, deeply embedding its roots on this land. Nourished by the martyr's blood, it only expands. Today, on Al-Quds Day, we remember the responsibility we bear. For to await our Savior doesn't mean to mindlessly stand in prayer, nor to refrain from political affairs. Rather, to wait means to actively prepare by making our soul and the world aware of the enemy's divisive schemes and imperialist regimes. And for our time to be carefully spent, working to hasten Mahdi's advent through paving the grounds of his movement. Today is the day oppressors are exposed, where we show it's the imperialists we oppose. We counter, divide, and conquer from the tyrants with our united and passionate chants. Today is a day of distinction between indifference and dedication, between oppressor and oppressed, between those firm in their protest and those apologetic to the governments of the West. Today, the line between truth and falsehood is expressed. Silence today is certainly not a choice, for upon it oppressors surely rejoice. A day of confrontation where the resistance fighters come out from isolation, a day the Muslims and all are called upon their obligation. A sign of faith is surely their participation. They must chant words against the occupation and support all the resistance from the oppressed nations. Today is a day that feet storm upon the streets as the superpowers quake in their seats. Their anxiety quickens as they watch those who fear only their creator alone. A day where it's shown that hope is pinned upon the masses, not on Western politicians who leave children in ashes. A day where we show we won't back down from this matter and we don't accept a tyrant's word of flatter. A day we make the world know that our spiritual and economic powers have the very strength to conquer. And that we should never be afraid, as in our possession is something the enemies can never embrace, for we have the power of faith. And above all, today is a day of reflection. To look within and question, do we help those who inflict oppression? Do we shy away from such topics, fearing the pursuit of our worldly prospects? Is the truth our concern, or is it comfort that we yearn? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Our next speaker is Rich Moreno. He's a teacher in the South Bronx and a community organizer. So that's so amazing. And he is speaking for the International Action Center.
Thank you, thank you. I'm proudly Chicano. so that means my family's from Mexico. And I'm also proud to be from the South Bronx. And I'm here to talk about how the South Bronx stands in strong solidarity and we look up to the Palestinian resistance for inspiration. The Palestinian struggle against the Zionist settler colonial project known as Israel is inextricably linked with the struggle waged in the South Bronx against gentrification and police violence. The NYPD and Israeli occupation forces are both tools of white supremacists. The Israeli Defense Forces are a permanent, occupying, militarized force in Palestine in the same way that the NYPD are a permanent, occupying, militarized force in black, brown, immigrant communities like mine in the South Bronx. U.S. politicians, especially Democrats, have granted local police departments the power to obtain U.S. military weapons, defense gear, and surveillance technology through the Department of Defense's 1033 program, which has transferred billions of dollars in military weapons to the NYPD and other police departments since its inception in the 90s. Israel is one of the U.S.'s largest weapons importers, having purchased tens of billions of dollars in military equipment since 1950. And we know what the racist state of Israel does with the U.S.-made weaponry. These weapons are used to surveil revolutionary activists from occupied Palestine to the South Bronx. Both are used to crush any dissent against Western imperialism. They attack innocent worshippers at Al-Aqsa Mosque, including mothers and children, and they target and kill or imprison Palestinians resisting Zionist settler colonialism. The NYPD trains with and exchanges tactics in violence and oppression with Israel. Who knew that the NYPD had a satellite office in Tel Aviv? They do. Racial profiling and crowd control tactics utilized by the NYPD against people of the South Bronx resisting police violence are learned from IDF suppression tactics in occupied Palestine. Understanding that both the US and Israel are white supremacist, settler colonial projects whose founding were predicated on genocide and stealing land explains why both rely on exploitation, violence, subjugation, and mass incarceration to keep their project going. Gaza is the world's largest open-air prison. The European settlers we learned about in our history classes are not a stain of the past because they still exist today, carrying out the same white supremacist colonial project of the 1800s when European settlers weaponized religion to commit genocide against the indigenous people of against indigenous people as they colonized the Americas. This manifest destiny still exists today. Imperialists want to displace and colonize indigenous Palestinians just like they want to displace and colonize my neighbors in the South Bronx. Understand that settler colonialism is a zero-sum game, and the end goal of the settler is to completely exterminate the indigenous population and replace it with a European-dominated society. It must be clear to us that for the survival of collective humanity and the planet, we cannot allow uncontested power to remain in the hands of colonizers. The South Bronx stands in solidarity with the Palestinian resistance because our common enemies are capitalism, imperialism, and white supremacy. Our loyalty should always be with oppressed people, struggling against the US empire and their puppet states like the puppet state of Israel. Strength and victory to the Palestinian resistance. Palestine will be free from the river to the sea. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine!
Free Palestine!
We have two amazing speakers left. So the second to last speaker, he is an activist, a community organizer. He has been on the front lines from day one. His name is Bill Doris. Bill, are you here?
Thank you. On behalf of Struggle La Lucha, La lucha por socialismo, struggle for socialism. We are honored to stand here today in solidarity with the people of Palestine who are being murdered every day by bombs and rifles and artillery supplied by the United States. Before he was murdered by the CIA, Dr. Martin Luther King said that the bombs that fall on Vietnam come from the schools and hospitals, really fall also on the communities here, on oppressed communities here. That's no less true today. The U.S. made bombs that fall on Gaza, that fall on Yemen, that fall on Syria, that fall on Iraq, come from our hospitals, from our schools, from our transportation, from our jobs. They are deliberately impoverishing Black and Latinx and Native and working class people in this country to pay for endless war against the people of Palestine. The blood of the children of Palestine is on the hands of Joe Biden and Donald Trump and Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell and Joe Manchin and every single senator and congressperson who votes for an endless supply of arms to murder the people of Palestine who are fighting for the most basic human right, the right to live in peace and freedom in their own country. And they will not stop fighting, and we will not stop fighting with them until every Palestinian has the right to live in peace and freedom in every corner of the land of Palestine. And until the racist, apartheid, white supremacist entity called Israel goes the way of Rhodesia and Nazi Germany and apartheid South Africa and the Confederate States of America. That's why we need to build a movement here in this country that can shut down the war machine. There's going to be a great conference next weekend. Other speakers will tell you about that. I hope everyone can come at the People's Forum. Long live Palestine. End all aid to the racist state of Israel. U.S. out of the Middle East. Free Palestine from the river to the sea. Palestine will be free. River to the sea. Palestine will be free.
Thank you so much. Our very last speaker is Lamise Deek. She is an attorney, human rights advocate, specializing in defending Arab and Muslim community members, activists, and organizers against governmental attack. And she is representing Al-Awda, New York, the Palestine Right to Return Coalition, and Palestinian Assembly for Liberation.
Assalamu alaikum. Peace and blessings upon you, with whom we are honored to stand. And when I say you, I don't mean just you in the rally. I am talking to all the good people of conscience in New York City, to all the people of the world who understand and believe and fight for justice and against oppression wherever it may be. And so is it an honor to be here with you who are among the most righteous. It is an honor to say that we lift our voices, however few and wherever it may be, in service of justice and in the name of the oppressed. We are here just as we are in New York and in Palestine. We are of diverse backgrounds, of diverse religions, of diverse sects, of diverse class backgrounds, of various colors, united by the single fact that we reject oppression, that we reject injustice, that we reject genocide, because in Palestine it is not only apartheid, it is genocide. And this country and this government expands that genocide by criminalizing Palestinians who dare resist and fight against and reject their own murder. So we say, what do we do next and what is asked of us? What is asked of us is we do as our people in Gaza do. When people in Jerusalem stood outside Al-Aqsa and they beseeched a besieged people. They beseeched a besieged people, and the besieged people in Gaza yielded their lives without asking, where are you from and how do you pray? They stood united and they raced towards death in service of the oppressed, in service of the highest form of love, the love of the other, the love of the Mazlum, the love of God. They did not ask, where do you come from and how do you pray and how do you sleep? They were united. They did not ask, what gains can we make from this sacrifice other than to give and do better for those who came after us. So what is asked of us is to prioritize the other and the oppressed above the nafs, while never compromising our own dignity, which also requires that we give ourselves that which we give the others, to not betray ourselves, whether it's by eating dates made in Zionist settlements, or by working with collaborators, or worst of all, by apologizing when Palestinians do that which is most beautiful. When Palestinians stand bare-chested, when Palestinians fight drones with fishnets and confront snipers with smoke and mirrors barefooted, that we never betray the noble, the holy, the sacred Palestinian resistance, and that wherever we go, we declare unequivocally that all Palestinians are freedom fighters, that those who fight for justice and the other, like Hamas, like Jabha, like Islamic Jihad, like the Iranian Al-Quds forces, like the PFLP, are all freedom fighters who fight not just for the defense and liberation of Palestine. They fight for the safety and the protection of all people to whom Israel as apartheid is a global threat, to whom Israel as the mobilizer of the world global machine from Sudan to Guatemala, where they have killed tens of thousands of people, is a global threat, that our resistance serves not just themselves and Palestinians, but serves the world. And then the question becomes, where and how do we vectorize this knowledge of justice, this rage and this anger? We do not say, come to our conference on Friday merely to promote, but the war has escalated. The war of liberation is coming. Palestinians inside Palestine, Palestinians you see here, are facing a new and renewed threat to our daily lives, and this requires that our allies on the streets of New York stop, confront, expose, and demand the dismantlement of Zionist settler groups that are mobilizing war crimes in Palestine, that we escalate our direct action against this corridor of war crimes, that we escalate our direct action at our campuses and against war corporations, that we expose and leave no enclave safe for the oppressors who seek to expand and revive apartheid for the purpose of genocide. It requires that we are also clear and united with the Palestinian demand, which is the return of every single Palestinian refugee to their original lands and homes. It is for the liberation of every inch of historic colonized Palestine. And it is for the dismantlement of every institution of Zionist supremacy inside and outside of Palestine, which threatens everybody. And to stay clear in those demands, to wield them wherever you go, whether people agree or not. You do not ever change your language or betray the demands of the Palestinian people and the resistance. On that note, we thank you all. We hope to see you, yes, again on the streets, but also in the workshops, coordinating and strengthening each other and our movement, and therefore all people. Wassalamu alaikum.
the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, we support the Palestinian people's God-given right to self-defense. This is one of the fundamental human rights. And yet the Palestinian people are not afforded this right in the discourse about the Israel-Palestine conflict. Side issues are always brought up to the forefront, side issues like rocket attacks or suicide bombings. The reality of the matter is the Palestinian people are virtually defenseless with no army, no navy, no air force. Meanwhile, they're confronted and attacked by the most powerful and advanced military in the region. They've been expelled from their villages and cities for 60 years now. They've been confined to the Bantustus, in which they are subject to attack at any time from the Israeli military or from the Israeli settlers who attack with impunity. So within this context, we say that we support the Palestinians' God-given right to self-defense. We support the Palestinian people's right to choose their own government. It is absurd and an insult for any nation to tell another nation which leaders they should choose and how they should govern themselves. Yet our government, the US government, as well as a subservient national media, has repeatedly made the outrageous demand for the Palestinian people that they should choose a political leadership from among a few who happen to be acceptable at that particular moment in time. American citizens and citizens from any other nation, if faced with these same brash demands from foreigners, you would never tolerate such interference. Take, for example, our recent presidential elections. Imagine if the Chinese government and media demanded that Americans elect Mitt Romney as president, followed by warnings that if we didn't comply, they would cut off their dealings with us and sanction the country. If we Americans were faced with this demand, we would laugh at the absurdity of this demand and probably attack China for its insolence. But this is what the Palestinian people have to put up with from our government and media. This is why we support the Palestinian people's right to choose their own government. We as citizens and residents of the United States will support our Palestinian brothers and sisters by participating in the consumer boycott of apartheid Israel by boycotting the major American companies. We will support a one-state solution. We support a state in the Holy Land that Prophet Abraham, Prophet Moses, Prophet Jesus, and Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon all of them, would want to be citizens of. We support a state that offers equal rights to Christians, Jews, and Muslims. We support a peaceful dismantling of the Zionist state and a referendum with participation from all Christians, all Jews, and all Muslims within the present-day borders of the Zionist state, as well as participation from the Palestinian people within the occupied territories. We have full confidence that the South African model for peaceful dismantling of the apartheid system could be replicated with apartheid Israel. Without this dismantling of the cancerous apartheid system in Israel, which is the foundation of the Zionist ideology, there can be no peace in the region. This is why we support a one-state solution. No justice! No justice! From the river to the sea,